Marisha here, and today I'm going to tell you about a fun day trip you can take from London, and that is to a place called Bletchley Park. Now, Bletchley Park is north of London. It's really easy to get to. You just hop on the train at Euston Station and you get off at the Bletchley Station, and Bletchley Park is maybe not even quarter of a mile from the station. So super simple. It's located about equidistant between Oxford and Cambridge, and that is by design and because Bletchley Park is where all of the code breaking took place during World War II. So it was this sort of base with lots of outbuildings, and at its height, thousands of workers working there around the clock to break ciphers from Germany, Italy, Japan, and they wanted to bring in like mathematicians, and so they're tapping into sort of the Oxford and Cambridge University communities for that. So it's a really big complex. This is not a, oh, we're going to pop in for an hour or two museum, because it's about 10 plus buildings that you can go into and see. I've got a map here, so I'll show you. There's kind of like they call it a lake. I mean, it's not a lake. It's just it's a water feature. But there's a lake here, and then there's all of these buildings around it that you can go into, and each building has some information about what was happening in that building, who was working there, what kind of work were they doing, and also information about kind of like the daily lives of the people who worked at Bletchley Park. Some of them sort of lived there, some of them lived in neighboring like houses as boarders. So, like I said, at the height of its operation, there were thousands of people working there, and they were working on various projects, and they didn't necessarily know what other people were working on or what was going on in other buildings, and that was for security purposes. There is a ton of information. So if you're interested in World War II, if you're interested in, code breaking, it will be really, really fascinating for you. Like I said, lots and lots of information on a variety of things. So you're going to learn about how did they figure out like Enigma, right? That's where Enigma was broken. And if you're familiar with Alan Turing, right, this is where Alan Turing was working. You can see his office. But there's also like Lorenz machines and the bomb, different sort of cryptographic machines that were used to break various types of code. And it kind of walks you through how they broke different types of code, because, the Germans are using one thing, but the Japanese are using something else. And so those code breaking strategies differ. It talks about how like what the impact of that code breaking was. There's a short 12-minute film you can watch about how it impacted D-Day, and the information that people were able to gather as a result of the code breaking that happened at Bletchley Park is what made like D-Day successful. So they were able to spread misinformation to the Axis powers, and all of that. It's really, really fascinating. And like I said, it's plan to spend a day there, or like half a day. Plan to spend about like 5 hours there. um I don't think I spent quite 5 hours there, but there were definitely a few things that I sort of glossed over a little bit, and could go back. And part of the reason why I did that is that that is an option. One of the great things about Bletchley Park, and this is true for some other places in Britain, is that when you buy a ticket, it's actually good for a year. It's essentially a season pass, so you can go back. And because it's so easy for me, I thought, okay, I'll just look at some things that are really in depth that I want to see, maybe gloss over a few other things, and then I can come back another time within the year, to sort of get that information as well. And especially if there's a different special exhibit on, because in addition to all of the permanent displays about World War II code breaking, they had a special exhibit on AI when I went. So you'll go into various blocks and huts, and some of them are set up to look like how the offices would have looked. So you'll see like old timey typewriters and filing systems. There's also the mansion, which is it really stands out because like the rest of the huts and blocks are very like cement bunkers, but the mansion was there before it was turned into Bletchley Park for code breaking. It was already an estate built in the late 1800s. And so there is a mansion there and with some beautiful architecture, and you can go in there and see, again, more information about how that was used and what those rooms were used for, like the ballroom, and how at first they wanted it to be a place for, storing extra information, but eventually it became a recreational space for people to kind of unwind. Um, I think for me, the most interesting thing about the mansion is one of the offices that are set up, and it talks about how in that office was a meeting with, I think it was four different American generals who came over and met with the commander at Bletchley Park before Pearl Harbor, like a few months before Pearl Harbor, to kind of talk strategies and things. And that's considered the beginning of the special relationship between the US and the UK. So that was interesting to read about. And there are other places where you'll read about how like the Allies kind of worked together. But for the most part, it's very much focused on the work that was happening at Bletchley Park, which is really fascinating. And if you are American and you know something of Bletchley Park, my guess is you might know about it because you watched the PBS. I mean, it was a British series, but it was imported through PBS, Bletchley Circle, which, if you haven't seen it, I recommend that you watch it. It's really good. It's about, it's fictional, but it's about four women who worked at Bletchley Park who later, like a decade later in the 50s, um, solve basically like a serial killer, like catch a serial killer using the strategies, the data analysis that they would have used in Bletchley Park. So that's just kind of like a tangential recommendation that you watch that miniseries. I actually, when I came home yesterday from Bletchley Park, I rewatched it, the first season, and it was really then even better to watch because I could see some of the machines and things because it starts out with them working at Bletchley Park, and I could see the stuff that I had seen in the museum. It was really a great way to sort of cap my day. So if you're planning a trip to London and you have some extra time, I would recommend considering taking a day trip to Bletchley Park. And again, you probably could do it in like half of a day and then come back and still have time in the evening to do some things because Bletchley Park opens at 9:30, which is kind of early compared to a lot of things in London open at 10. So if you're an early bird and you get up and you want to leave at 8:30 and get to Bletchley Park by 9:30, then spend 4 hours there. You still have the whole rest of the half of a day to come back to London and do things here. They have a really sizable gift shop with a lot of books about code breaking, espionage. There's one that I picked up. I didn't end up buying it, but I thought it might be interesting that does trace kind of the history of the special relationship between the US and the UK and talks about kind of especially how they work together with intelligence operations. Um, but there are books about women who worked during the war, books about computing. There is a National Computer Museum within walking distance. I didn't go because I'm not that interested. But if that's your thing, then you'll definitely want to plan maybe then full day, half of it at Bletchley Park, and then go to the computing museum. But one of the things that I did pick up at the bookstore was instructions for American servicemen in Britain in 1942. I've already read most of it. I'm going to finish reading it up, and then I might do a video on it because it's very fascinating. The advice that was given to Americans who were coming over to the UK. And so it might be fun to do a video saying, like, yeah, this advice still holds, or this advice maybe not so applicable anymore. But this was a fun little thing to get. And the other great thing about Bletchley Park is they have a stamp. And if you want, they'll stamp your book to say that you purchased it at Bletchley Park. Um, so Again, that's like a fun little day trip. I will probably do some other videos about day trips that you can take from London. I've already been to Brighton, for example, Canterbury, Windsor, Stonehenge. So there are a lot of really good options if you're doing a more kind of extended stay in London and you have time to take a day trip somewhere. So that'll be some upcoming videos somewhere down the road. In the meantime, like, subscribe, tell your friends how gnarly this channel is, and I'll see you next time.